We were only children then. I suppose if we were adults, we might not have ignored the signs, the contradictions that existed on the path that never ends, the old paint on fresh wood, the birdless birdsong, and the fact that nothing cast a shadow. We might have dealt with Billy better, with his obsession, and we might have stopped him. And I wouldn't be alone now, except for a hand-drawn map, a map that grows every day. All alone, except for the birds that say her name. The road, the path that cuts through Black Rock Wood. I've spent all day on it. It's weird. I don't think it ends. The voice was Billy Bramble's. It grew louder as he watched his massive ginger hair tumble into the treehouse. Annie looked at me with an eyebrow raised, as if to say, "Really?" She turned to face him. "You were lost, Billy. Past just can't go on forever. Face it, you got lost and you spent the day walking in circles." I nodded in agreement. Billy had never been the best with directions, and the thick lenses of his glasses didn't do him any favors when it came to recognizing landmarks. But Billy insisted that he hadn't been lost, and slammed a map down on the wooden floor of the treehouse. "Look," he said, and there was something in his voice that I had never heard before. Halfway between fear and confidence, a sense that what he was telling us was not only true, but dangerous. His chubby finger traced the route that he had taken, and he had marked it with a red pen. "After the fork, you pass a Giant Step." Giant Step was a set of flat boulders in the woods, black stone covered in rashes of moss and lichen. "And after you, pass it, you climb up a little way to here. Now, when you're here," Billy was pointing now at a small hill, and the dried riverbed that ran down its south face. "You can turn left, and follow the path that loops back to town, or the old riverbed. There's no way I can be wrong about this. You can see on the map, fork, Giant Step, hill, riverbed. The map says that if you follow the riverbed, you'll be out on the other side of the forest in 15 minutes? Billy's voice was getting a little faster now, almost frantic. "But I walked in a straight line, followed the riverbed, until it turned into a path, and on for hours, and the path never ended. It just kept going." Annie looked at me, raising both her eyebrows this time. We were humoring him, sure, but although Annie wasn't convinced, something inside me was intrigued. Billy looked up at both of us, his eyes wide and pleading. And it got weird. There were signs and noises and... Annie interrupted. "You got scared." Billy blushed a little and stared at the map in silence, tracing the supposed route with his finger. I broke the silence, trying to be as diplomatic as possible. "Look, Billy, we'll take a look tomorrow, okay? We'll pack some food and bring all our maps and compasses and take a look. It can't hurt." I glanced at Annie, trying to stay with my eyes, play along. Billy had never had an easy time at school or at home, and he didn't need his closest friends mocking him too. She went to speak and then paused, and rolled her eyes before agreeing. "Tomorrow." Our accounts of the next day differed greatly. We had followed the exact route Billy had sketched out, and had found, even with all of us reading our own maps, that the path we were on seemed by all accounts not to exist. The map showed that it should have been fields, and then roads and a smattering of farmhouses, but instead the path just kept going, unfolding into the distance between the trees. We followed it for an hour or so, in silence, and whenever one of us began to speak, it would quickly fade off. Something felt wrong, and the sounds of the forest around us became muted, and we could hear 3 birds, screaming somewhere in the bush, but could never see them. And there was a sense that we were being watched from somewhere, and all of us were checking behind us more than we would like to admit. And occasionally, when there would be a crack or a noise, we would all freeze, and at one point, even though she had denied to this day, Annie grabbed my hand. There is a stillness on that path, a stillness that we were intruding on. Annie said that we were lost, and made a show of getting angry at the both of us, saying that we were doing nothing but scaring ourselves with this, and that we were just kids, and kids get lost all the time. But I remember hearing in her voice a sense of genuine panic, like her windpipe was contracting a little bit. I didn't put up much of a fight. I wanted to get home quickly anyway. The place gave me the creeps. There were these strange stone formations that lined the path, pebbles stacked on one another, and small wooden carvings next to them. Wooden carvings stained a dark brown, with runes we couldn't understand, that seemed to come from the earth instead of being placed on it. There were signs as well, although we couldn't read the writing on those. And when we took a closer look, we could see that the wood was almost brand new, as if it had a fresh coat of varnish that morning. And the paint that made the words seem to be old, cracking, peeling, almost like rust. We had sensed then, I think, that something was wrong in that forest, and all of us had silently come to our own conclusions about how we were going to understand it. Annie denied it, loudly and often. I also denied it, more out of fear than anything else, thinking that if I could convince myself that it didn't exist, then I could get rid of the nagging sense that something was lurking out there. Billy, on the other hand, became obsessed. We all grow apart as we get older, but Billy really alienated himself. We had been his only two friends at the time, both misfits and weirdos in our own way, but he began to keep us at an arm's length. We would catch him sometimes, making his way to the woods with a huge backpack, obviously off on some long expedition into the unknown, and Annie would make a joke. Something about the fact that it seemed as if he would just walk in circles for a week. It almost seemed then, although I came to learn otherwise, that she had finally convinced herself that there was nothing in Black Rock. Once, I saw Billy come back from an expedition, after fielding calls all week from his mom asking where he was, like we had agreed, and there was a look in his eye, a grim determination. And when I tried to speak to him, it was as if he wasn't there at all, as if he had left part of his mind in the forest, and his hands were shaking, and his cheeks were hollow, and he held in his hand a muddy yellow ribbon that seemed to be stained with blood. When I asked what had happened, he only shook his head, and looked at me the way an adult looks at a child, like he now knew something I couldn't, and he walked off. That night I received a call. The voice sounded something like his mom, but it was deeper, warped, like she was learning to speak, to construct sounds and string them together. And the voice said, "Billy is very, very sick." And then there was nothing. And then the voice said again, "Billy is very, very sick. Billy is very, very sick indeed, and will not be playing with you again." I tried to say something, so many questions. Why? Who was this? But the voice continued one last time. "Billy is very, very sick." I assumed he and his mom had come down with the same illness or something. And so from that day on, I never played with Billy Bramble again. In fact, I don't think we ever spoke properly again. He killed himself a few years later. Billy's suicide tore us apart, both me and Annie, from the inside, and we could never really talk after that. We both felt that we could have done something, could have stopped it in some way, And when it was revealed that he had been writing strange things in his diary, about there being 2 of them, and the path that had never stopped, and how they wouldn't let you see them, I think both me and Annie realized that we should have done something. His mental health had always been all over the place, and the bullying at school combined with parents who'd rather he didn't exist must have put him in a dark place. But despite that, I never thought that Billy seemed suicidal. I suppose people never do. And for this reason, I kept this to myself. But I couldn't help but feel like there was a part of the puzzle that we were all missing. But grief ate away at both Annie and me, day and night. I shrank into myself, focused on school, got good grades, went to a good university, made my parents proud. Annie had the opposite reaction, acting out, blaming herself, turning to drink and drugs, and never quite made it out of our hometown. Last I heard, she had some dealer boyfriend and worked part-time at our local pub. Time passed, we grew older, changed. I did well at university, made a handful of close, trusted friends, and secured a decent job for myself. But before that started, I had a couple of months to kill and came home to see my parents for the holidays. I found myself with nothing to do that evening. I didn't have any friends to reach out to, and so I decided to go for a drink. And if you want a drink, there's only one pub in town, the Crown. I found myself a seat at the back, ordered a pint, and got out a shabby paperback from my bag. It was around 10 p.m. when I heard the argument, and her voice. It couldn't have been anyone else's. It was loud and brash and crackled like electricity or an open fire, and I could hear it through the thin windows. Annie. There was another voice, lower and meaner, a man's, and I could make out some sort of argument, and Annie was saying that this was finally it, Mark, and that this time she wasn't coming back, and that she couldn't do this, couldn't be treated like this. When she knew how many whores he had, and he was screaming back but louder, and calling her stupid and other things, and saying that she couldn't go, not anywhere, and then he laughed, and I heard the sound of a glass smash. I was drawing closer to the window at this point, ignoring the looks from the other people, trying to hear more through the crack in the window. And he was saying that she could run wherever she liked, but he would find her. He would track her down and make her sorry that she was running her whore mouth like this. And I could tell from his tone that he was really enjoying this, savoring the power that he had. And he said it wasn't like she had anywhere else to go. And I heard footsteps. And when I peered through the window, I could see him screaming at the back of Annie as she ran off into the night. And he was saying, "Run. Run all you like. I'll find you, Annie Spenwood. I'll find you, and this time, I won't be so nice. This time, I'll make it last." I knew then exactly where she was going, and left the pub, taking a moment to look at what I assumed was her ex, the man that she had been arguing with. A short, nasty-looking man who was smoking a cigarette, and tearing the cardboard pack into tiny, small pieces. I tried to follow as quickly as possible without making it look as if I were following her, knowing that she was headed for the forest, the only place that he wouldn't find her, knowing she must have been so far ahead, desperately wanted to catch up with her, to offer to take her in, to get her out of this town, just to see her, to help in some way. I remembered the route through the forest like it was yesterday, and with only the torch on my phone to help, I was as fast as possible. Fork, giant step, hill, riverbed. There were times when I thought I could hear her, sobbing in the distance, at the sound of footfall ahead. But whenever I called her, there was nothing in response. Fork, giant step, hill, riverbed. I followed the riverbed until it turned into a path, and began to see these strange rock formations that I had remembered from all those years ago. Pebbles stacked on pebbles stacked on pebbles, with fresh carvings around their base, Strange people-shaped wooden figures, wicker shapes, ruins that I couldn't understand. But there were more of them now, and in the dark it sometimes seemed as if there were people placing them there. As if when my torch shined at them, it just caught figures melting into the night. But I knew that was only a trick of the light. I forged on, down the path that I knew had no end, shouting her name over and over and over. Annie! Annie! But each time, there was no response. Only two birds who called to each other, as if mocking me. I was about to give up when I found her bag leaned against a rock. I could tell that it was hers. It was the same one that she had had when we were teenagers, worn to be almost threadbare now, basically impractical. And all I could find inside was an envelope and 200 pounds in notes. I waited there by the empty bag for a while. My phone had no reception, and even if it did, her number must have changed. But there was something else. A sense that I wasn't alone. In the dark, and whenever I cast the light of my torch on the roots of trees, it was as if, for a second, they were growing, worming their way into the ground. And I thought that I could make out footfall. But I wasn't sure if it was going away from me or coming towards me. And I made the decision then to turn off my light for a second and just sit in the dark. And as I sat there, trying to make my breathing as quiet as possible, the two birds continued to scream. I wasn't sure if it was my mind playing tricks or the adrenaline, but the calls began to sound more and more like words, like a word, as if they were saying, Annie, Annie, Annie. As if they were mocking me, or mimicking me. And then terror seized me, by the throat and by the chest, and I realized that we had been right all those years ago, that there was something wrong with this road. And in the dim light of the moon, I felt as if the trees on either side were closing in on me, and the voices were now screaming back at me from the dark. Annie! Annie! And in between her name, I could make out rustling from the bush, from the trees, and something like the rhythm of feet on the ground, but deeper, lower, and the rustling turned to a low hum, turned to rustling again. Sounds changed and warped my ears and the world around me. And although I hated myself for it, and although I knew I needed to help Annie, I turned and ran. And as I ran back down the path that stayed so straight, I felt like I could hear footfall behind me, getting faster and faster and faster, as if whatever I had been following had now decided to follow and catch me. And the birds that I couldn't see but hear were all around me, screaming her name, Annie, Annie. And my breath was ragged and hot in my chest, and whatever was running after me was getting faster and faster and faster. But so was I, running faster than I ever have in my life, aware now that something must be behind me, and so close now, practically on my back. I considered turning off into the bush, into the trees, and straying from the path, but something deep within me knew that wasn't an option, that whatever strange power this place held would be made 1,000 times worse in there, and so I kept running, until I found the riverbed, climbed the hill, past Giant Step, and ran all the way home. I said nothing to my parents, and sat in bed with all the lights on until the sun came up. Since then, I've been determined not to let Annie down again. I know she's down that path somewhere, alone and afraid, and I will find her. I've started in the daylight hours, beginning to map the path, tying ribbons to trees to mark every 500 meters. I've begun to take notes on the ruins, when and where they occur, and the carvings. I keep silent, and as such the cause are just that, cause. Although I still haven't seen the birds. I've noticed a few more things. There is no sun on the path, and there are no shadows. The air feels still, almost as if it leads out of time. Annie's envelope had a long letter to Billy, which was too painful to read. But when I skimmed the first page to see what it was, I could feel the pain that she was in. She kept saying how sorry she was, and how she should have believed him, and that she wished so badly that he was here because she needed him more than ever. Had she been planning to go down the path before this, or did she just carry this around? Was it a part of a breakdown? I have so many questions, and day by day, I get a little further down the path. But as far as I get, I can never shake the feeling that I'm not alone. Whoever, whatever is out there, is keeping a close eye on me. I'm sure of it. And only when I work out why will I be able to find her. But there's a reason that I'm writing this. A reason I'm making sure to get this all down. I've been noticing changes on the path. The ruins are changing. The messages are growing longer. And I think I might be beginning to vaguely understand them. They correspond with the carvings and figures below, and it seems as if they work together to tell some sort of story. What the stories are, I'm not sure, but I feel that these stories may not be told by people, but by the path itself, as if whatever power lurks here is folding in on itself infinitely. There are ribbons that aren't mine, and that I'm sure weren't there before. They're a different color and at different intervals. I've marked them down on my map all the same, but they feel different. Often when I see a new ribbon for the first time, I'll hear footsteps in the distance. No matter how quickly I turn, I can never catch the noise that's making them, but they're there. Ribbons, the color of the sun, a deep yellow, that seem to shine slightly in the morning air. I've never made it until nightfall yet. Try and set off as early as possible so I can get back before it's dark. But I feel that these ribbons would shine even then. I feel that in the same way, my ribbons mark my understanding of the path. These ribbons mark its understanding of me. And I think the more that it knows, the more it starts to hate me. And sometimes the cause of the birds will start screaming her name, or my own, so loud that I have to crouch down and cover my ears. But yesterday, as I came back from a morning on the path, I saw something that changed everything. Something that made my blood run cold, and my stomach turn, and my hands shake. There, tied around the gate in front of my house, was a yellow ribbon. The front door to my house was open a crack, and I could hear the phone ringing inside. But I couldn't take my eyes off the ribbon. A ribbon. A ribbon, the color of the sun.